science and ICT. And today we have the pleasure to have Associate Professor Kavi Kedu, my good friend as well. And Kavi is actually the dean of the faculty. And since some time, we have been trying to find a space, and then today it happened. So I think you'll learn a lot from today's workshop. Please make the most of it. So how we'll proceed? Dr. Kedu will be having 45 minutes to 1 hour talk, and then that will depend on how fast she goes and how fast you get it. And then we will open the floor for some questions as well. Good. So if everything is okay, Kavi, if you can just, yes, you are recording. I'll leave the floor to you. And on behalf of the Doctoral School, we thank you again for your time and even at this hour. Thanks a lot, Kavi.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Stano. Let me share my screen. I'm still admitting some more participants, so bear with me. There's still people in the waiting room. Okay, just participant, you can confirm if my screen is visible.
Yes, it's good.
Okay, good. I'm still getting some participants, so let me admit them as well. Then we'll make a start. Okay, I think we are good to go. Okay, so I would like to extend my thanks to Doctoral School for having me to have this presentation today. I welcome all MPhil PhD students of the different faculties that have been invited. So first of all, let me present myself. So I'm Kavi Kedu from the Faculty of Information Communication and Digital Technologies. I'm currently the Dean of Faculty. And my main topic of discussion for today is conducting systematic literature reviews using Kitchenham and PRISMA methods. So Kitchenham and PRISMA method, they are just a means mechanism that we are going to use, but the main focus remain SLR, commonly known as SLR. So that is systematic literature review. So from the very outset, before I go into any discussion, so I would like to ask all those who are participating right now, whether you have published any SLR in the past, because I know that many of you are at the different stages of your PhD. Some have just started, some are quite advanced in your PhD. You may have published an SLR, but be careful, it should be an SLR. I'm not talking about a review. A review is something, but a systematic literature review is something else. So if anyone have published, just inform me. You can inform me on the chat as well. I'm okay. If we can hear from you, if anyone has published an SLR. I don't see anything from the chat. I see, for example, Sudha Chirkut is around, so definitely we have an SLR together. So you should be saying yes, yeah, I've received your answer. So I'm taking your example of SLR in my talk today. So it will be used as a sample SLR because it is a good one. But anyway, so of others, I don't see any yes from the chat, neither on Zoom, on audio. So I take it that you have not published any SLR. So it's good. So you will definitely, if you have not yet published an SLR, so you should be learning from this presentation today, because publishing an SLR definitely is a challenging task. It's not like publishing a normal paper. Actually, it is a lot more easy to publish a paper in even a journal paper in a very good journal on your own topic that you are doing research. That is your main technical topic. You have your methodology, you have your work that you're presenting, the results that you're presenting, because this is your own work, you have your own appreciation. Obviously, you do compare your work with others and do an evaluation, but conducting an SLR is even more challenging than publishing a paper on your own work. And as I think as PhD students, by the end of your PhD, if you have done an extensive literature review, you can have the potential to convert it into an SLR. And this is what I'm going to try to convey to you today. That is what is different from a literature review that I do in my PhD. So all of you will have to do a literature. I don't think there is, I think we have invited STEM students to this presentation, that is from science, engineering, mathematics, and IT, and all the technology area. So all of you in your thesis, I know that you will have a literature review. You can call it literature review, you can call it background study, you can call it different names, but you will be doing a part on literature, because this is expected from any PhD. But this is not what I'm talking about. Having your PhD literature review is one thing. Having an SLR is a different thing, because SLR normally become a reference in this area, and to do it, obviously there's lots of challenge. There are a number of steps. The big word there in the whole title that I have proposed is let me admit a few other students. Yeah, so the main word that we are talking about in this title here, literature reviews, you are very familiar. Let's not discuss about Kitchenham and PRISMA for the time. And this all just means, and I will just do a quick overview of this. But the main word that changed the whole thing as compared to your normal literature review is this word systematic. It changed the whole thing. That when you're saying that you're doing, excuse me, you are doing a systematic literature review, the word systematic, when it is there in the title of your paper, okay, or even in your PhD thesis, it can be that you claim that you are doing a systematic literature review. But you need to be extremely careful when you say that you are doing a systematic literature review. There are lots of expectation that will come together with it, and you should be aware of it. Otherwise, you may be running into trouble. So this is why this talk is important, that you know exactly what is an SLR, what are the different components that reviewers, that examiners will expect from you when you use this word systematic in your literature review. Okay, don't use it lightly, because otherwise you can run into big trouble. If you are doing a normal literature review, put your literature review normal literature review. Okay, and all of you will have a literature review. But don't have the temptation without understanding, saying that you are doing a systematic literature review and thinking that just by choosing appropriate papers, summarizing those papers, comparing those papers, and presenting the result, critically analyzing those papers, this is enough. It is far from being enough. Actually, there are lots of things that is expected from you when you are conducting a systematic literature. And this is what will be my main point of discussion in this presentation today, to apprise you, to highlight to you. Obviously, we won't be able to go through each and every technique that we have, but at least to tell you that these are the techniques that we have that you can further investigate when you are conducting an SLR. So basically, let me start the discussion. This was a brief background of expectation, what you can expect from this presentation today, and some motivation as well, why it is important for you to follow this presentation, and how it will be helpful to you in your PhD, in your future publication as well. Let me show to you the agenda. Here it is. So we will start with systematic reviews as well. I've already given you some highlights. Okay, but there are different types of reviews, and we need to differentiate with the other type of reviews and a systematic review. This will be my first point of discussion to make it clear to everyone what are we talking about when we are saying a systematic review. Others are joining. Let me admit them. So in the first part of the presentation, obviously, we will be discussing about what is this systematic literature review, why it is important, what are the characteristics of a systematic a review, and how it compares with a traditional literature review that we normally do in our PhD. All of you are doing it in your PhD. So this is one. And second, I will present to you a generic steps, a number of phases, a process, let me put it this way, a generic process for conducting a systematic a review. Okay, and if you follow those generic steps only, it will be largely enough to be able to publish an SLR, a systematic literature review, and you can use it even in your PhD if ever you are going for a systematic a review. And sometimes I can tell you, I've been in different board of examiners for PhDs and everything. I have myself evaluated a PhD thesis for other countries, and sometimes there are expectations for the candidates to conduct a systematic literature review, not only a general review. I've seen comments from external examiners where there were requirements to perform a concrete systematic literature review. So this is why, again, it is important that you are aware of it. So most of my presentation will be on this second point, that is stages of a systematic review. That is 3/4 of the presentation will be on this point only. Then I will just touch on into Kitchenham method. When I will be discussing all the stages, already Kitchenham follow those stages. There will not be much that I would have to say in Kitchenham, just that it organizes it slightly different. So I will pinpoint this when we reach this Kitchenham method. And then we have the PRISMA statement. This is mainly for reporting your results, so a mechanism for reporting your results. So we'll discuss about this as well very briefly. Then last, I will give you a sample. Okay, so a sample literature review, a good one. Okay, that has been recently published by one of the participants in this talk, Mrs. Sudha Chekut. So I will even show to you, for the benefits of everyone, when we first submitted this literature that is SLR, what was the comments from the reviewer? This will be very important for you to see what reviewers look for when they are evaluating such papers, a systematic literature review. What do they look for? So you will see in those comments, and I can tell you this paper has gone through around 4 rounds of reviews before it was accepted. Obviously, it was a very high impact factor journal, so the review process was very stringent there. So I will just show to you some of the, not all rounds and everything, but some of the comments where we were told to do additional works, and where we were told that we need to do it differently. And anyway, all those points I will cover in the presentation, and you will see the reviewers' comments from experts in the area, how it match what I'm showing to you, those reviewers' comments, to show to you that when external people, external examiners and reviewers, when they will review your work, these are kind of things that they will look for. So it relates very closely to whatever I'm going to discuss in this presentation. So this was a brief overview. So let's start. What is a systematic a review as compared to, I will have a slide on comparison with traditional review as well. So a well-known, acceptable a definition is, it is a scientific investigation. So you see there, it is done in a scientific way that focuses on a specific a question, uses explicit predefined scientific methods to identify. So even some of you, for example, you go on Google Scholar, you find a few papers that is related to your research, and you decide to evaluate those papers because they are very close to your work. We don't do it this way in a systematic literature. If you do it this way, this is a random sample. This is just you are choosing, and this is very biased. A selection that you'll be doing. Actually, when you conduct an SLR, a systematic literature review, you need, as far as possible, remove all bias that you can have, and you cannot go and choose the way you want. There should be a scientific method that you are following in order to select your papers, in order to assess those papers, in order to summarize the findings of those studies, of those papers. So this is what he said in this first definition here. Down, you see, this is a point I've just mentioned. So systematic reviews minimize bias. You have bias all the time. Everything that you do, all work that you do, you have bias, because you have bias based on your past experience, based on the availability of resources, based on what you have at hand, based on your methodology that you are following. Some methodology is biased toward something, some other methodology will be biased towards some other criteria. There is always bias. And in systematic review, we try to identify those bias and eliminate those bias. So this is something I will show to you as we proceed. So a systematic review is a more scientific method of summarizing literature, because specific protocols are used. So you need to be using some protocol. And this is where Kitchenham is a specific protocol that we can use to conduct a systematic review. And whatever I'm going to discuss, you will see many of my examples relate to health systems, relate to clinical trials and everything. Why you have those examples? Because in those fields, systematic reviews are done more rigorously. Actually, you need to follow very carefully the review protocols, as we said. So they are very stringent when it comes to conducting systematic review. So this is why I will be taking many examples from those areas, but whatever I'm explaining is valid for any STEM area. That is, whether you're science, maths, engineering, anything, it will be very much in line to the subject as well. So what it says, because specific protocol are used to determine which studies will be included in the review. So you see, one very important consideration when you're conducting a systematic review, how have you chosen those studies at the end? Because there can be millions of studies in this area. You come to around, I don't know, 50 studies, 50 papers. How come you have chosen those 50 papers? There should be very scientific, a specific protocol that you have followed to do this. So already you get some highlights about what is expected in a literature review. So basically, it uses transparent procedures. It evaluates and synthesizes the results of independent studies. So the word there is transparent. It's very transparent. It is not done in how I will say, in a haphazard way. You cannot proceed in a haphazard way. You cannot say, because you feel that this study is very close to my main theme, so I'm choosing it. No, it cannot be this way. There should be a proper scientific mechanism for you to choose a particular study to include in your systematic review. So it should be very transparent. Procedures are explicitly defined in advance. Before you select any paper, you need to establish your procedures for selection, for example. Okay, this is done in advance. This is what is called the protocol, the review protocol, to assure that the process is transparent and can be replicated. So the word transparent we have seen. Next is replicated. So whatever you are doing, if you can do it again, so it has not been done in a haphazard way, that is not reproducible. That is, you can reproduce. When you reproduce, you will tend to have the same result. With the same criteria, you will have the same result. So it is repeatable, it is replicated. Okay, it can be replicated. So if you have followed a scientific method, so it will be replicated. Otherwise, it is just that you have done it in a haphazard way and it cannot be reproduced. Okay, so this process is also designed. This is coming again and again here in my presentation. Another main thing in main criteria for a systematic review, we minimize. I'm not saying because eliminating completely bias is practically impossible, but as far as possible, we minimize bias. Otherwise, you may have problems with reviewers. You may have problem with examiners saying that, no, your ideas are very biased towards something because you have not followed certain methodology. Again, be careful. I have seen it in many evaluation of PhD thesis itself, where examiners saying that you are making a claim, you are making a strong claim, but what is the underpinnings? What is the rationale based on which you are making this this very strong claim? Your claim is very biased. So in a systematic review, there is no room for bias. You need, as far as possible, to minimize the bias. So I think I've lengthily talk about the bias aspect. So let me admit some more students who wants to join. Okay, so a systematic review must have, this I will come to it anyway, clear inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is what I'm telling you, whatever you're selecting, it should be based on clear criteria. Why I'm selecting this study, this paper, why I'm not selecting that particular paper for me to conduct my review. Because when we conduct literature reviews, we select a number of papers. I'm very sure, for example, all of you have gone through the process of your writing up your PhD proposal. I have been myself for the last 3 years in the committee that evaluates MPhil PhD proposal at the University of Mauritius at the Doctoral School. So I have many of you, your proposal have gone through that particular committee when I was there. So in no proposal, we have seen, for example, a systematic review. And it was not expected as well. It's not something that I'm telling that you should have done, no. But it was a general literature review. You have selected randomly a few papers that you think is appropriate for your study, for your topic, and you have described it. This is how all students do it anyway. Okay, but I'm not talking about a literature review. I'm talking about a systematic literature review where clear inclusion and exclusion criteria should be defined in advance, a priori. Okay, and explicit search strategy when you're searching, don't go on Google Scholar, tap a few words and you say, by tapping those few words, I have got 100 results, so I've chosen those results. No, there should be very clear search strategy. What are search strategy? What kind of strategy you can implement in order to search papers? I will comment on this as we proceed in the presentation. However, your search strategy, not only you should define it, you should explicitly state it in your systematic literature review, how you have gone about in searching those papers. What strategy have you used? What strategy or what strategies have you used in order to search those papers? So I will show to you what are the different strategies that we have. Next is about systematic coding and analysis. That is, systematically, you need to extract information from those studies that you have chosen. Okay, and you need to have a coding mechanism to record those studies and analyze those, a proper mechanism to analyze those studies. And all studies should be analyzed in a scientific, in a fair, in a very a proper scientific manner. Okay, and where possible, we also perform meta-analysis. I will comment what is a meta-analysis, what is the difference between a systematic and a literature review, for example, and a meta-analysis. Actually, meta-analysis can be part of a systematic review. Very often you hear this word meta-analysis, so I will comment on it as we proceed if you are not already aware of it. So a systematic review provides more than just a summary. So when you do literature review in general, you provide just a summary of research literature related to a particular topic or question. Rather, they offer, that is the systematic review offer clear and compelling answers to questions related to who, why, and when of those studies. So this will become clearer as we proceed. So you have noted I'm putting lots of emphasis on showing to you the difference between a literature review and a systematic literature review. And I think my next question should address this point. Okay, here it is, type of reviews. So at the top here, you have general reviews, narrative, literature, traditional reviews. Okay, a subset of it is systematic review. So it is a specific kind of review. Now, meta-analysis, you can perform a meta-analysis independently as well. Okay, as a review. However, it very often it is part of a systematic review. So I will show you when do you perform a meta-analysis, when it makes sense to perform a meta-analysis in your systematic review. Okay, when it don't make sense as well. So I will comment on it as we proceed. Okay, let me address this question. I think more or less by now you have an idea, okay, about the difference between a traditional literature review, okay, and a systematic a review. So traditional reviews, okay, traditional literature review, they're subjective. Anyway, they are subjective because you are selecting those studies in a random fashion, in a haphazard way. So they are very much subjective based on your interpretation, based on your interpretation of what you think is important for your study. And then it tends to address broad questions. It is not focused. It is not addressing one specific questions. Okay, this tends to be the case. And the methods are unclear. It's just that it has been done this way. You're selecting randomly, you're analyzing randomly, you're performing a critical appraisal randomly. So there's no scientific mechanism of performing all those things. Whereas on the other side, okay, so this is a difference between apple and oranges here. On the other side, you have one clear objective, what I want to achieve in this review. Okay, so this is very clear to everyone. The questions tends to be narrow. Okay, that is, it is focused. We are trying to address specific question, very narrow question, and we need to focus on these points only. Other things I'm not looking at. I'm looking only at those points, at those questions. Okay, and methods clearly defined. This and most of the time I can tell you if a paper or even if there is comment with respect to a PhD thesis, okay, MPhil PhD thesis, okay, very often there are comments with respect to the methodology. There are comments with respect to the way, the approach, the steps you have taken, that they do. Sometimes reviewers, sometimes examiners don't agree, because by doing it in one particular way, you are somehow introducing some bias in your study. So very often these are areas where you need to be extremely careful, especially at the end when you will be writing your thesis, because it is highly debatable. This is a point where very often examiners they pinpoint things that are not appropriate. So be very careful. And obviously, in systematic reviews, we appraise those studies in a very scientific manner. Let me proceed. Okay, in this table here, again, I'm addressing the same question. What is the difference? So I've already told you in narrative review, general literature review that you normally do, that you have done in your MPhil PhD proposal, it is the question is broad. Okay, sometimes there's practically no question that you are addressing. You're just communicating recent works that have been done. Okay, and terms are not well defined. Whereas in a systematic review, question is very specific. Terms and protocol. This is the word here is very important. Here is protocol. Protocols are defined. The steps that you will follow, the criteria that you're going to use, all these things are clearly specified and known to everyone. Okay, and it is very clear to everyone. So how do you select your papers? Study selection. When I say studies, your papers that you're selecting. So study selection. Convenient sampling. This is what the word I was looking earlier. When you choose in a haphazard way, this is a convenient sampling. Convenient sampling is just you choose what you feel to be most appropriate for your study. Okay, and it is, you see the word that I have used before, it is a bias selection. Definitely it is a bias selection. What you have done in your proposal, MPhil PhD proposal, was a bias selection, and it is fully understandable. This is supposed to be the case at the start of your study. But if you are now conducting an SLR, a systematic literature review, you need to remove this bias. And how to do it? We're going to discuss about it. And whereas in systematic, it is exhaustive searches, so should be comprehensive, complete, okay, with predefined criteria applied for selection by more than one reviewer. You will notice that a systematic literature review normally cannot be done by only one person, because in the protocol itself, very often it says that views judgment needs to be cross-checked with another person. I will comment on it as we proceed. There is something called quality assessment. We are going to discuss it in the different steps when we discuss the different steps. So a selected studies assess for risks of bias. So you see, it is explicitly addressed this problem of bias in literature review, and you need to remove it and study quality. Then synthesis is basically taking all the studies that have been done in literature, putting it together and coming up with your analysis of those studies. So it can be qualitative. So in traditional literature review, it is qualitative, narrative. You just comment on it. Whereas in systematic review, sometimes it is quantitative. I'm not saying it is always. Not necessarily that in a systematic review that you need to have quantitative, but it can be quantitative as well, including meta-analysis. I will comment about meta-analysis as we proceed, with risk of bias considered explicitly. Okay, otherwise it is not a good systematic review. So in general, systematic review aims to decrease bias. Again, I'm saying it. And it increased what? It increased reproducibility and transparency. Both I have already explained earlier. So whatever you're doing should be repeatable. Okay, it can be replicated. This is reproducibility, and a transparency. Obviously, your steps, your whatever steps you are following, it is very clear and transparent. Again, here I'm still on the point of comparison. You see, narrative, very selective, does not follow strict systematic methods. Systematic, I've told you that there are search strategies that you use, and it is very methodological. And here's why I put this slide. There is this meta-analysis down here. When you perform a meta-analysis, after you can be part, not mandatorily, but it can be part of your systematic review. What is this meta-analysis? Meta-analysis is when you have been able to capture from the different studies some quantitative measures, okay, some quantitative parameters, okay, that you can statistically, you can tabulate, you can analyze in terms of numbers, for example. If you have such a case, then you can perform what is called a meta-analysis using statistical software, for example, okay, to analyze tendencies in values. Okay, if you have those measurements in those studies, very often in the results, you have those measurements, you tabulate those results, and you perform what is called a meta-analysis. Okay, meta means you analyze data about, very often we see metadata is data about data. So you analyze a analysis that has already been done through statistical, it says you're capable of performing statistical analysis of the pool results that you have collected from the studies. This is what is called a meta-analysis. That is statistical analysis of others' works in terms of values and everything. I will show you example as we proceed. Okay, I'm taking this point again, bias. I've told you, I know why you see this pyramid here. Okay, on this slide, you see down in general studies, there's lots of bias because you take everything and you don't have a scientific way or whatever. So bias is bound to be there. This is why it is at the bottom of the pyramid. As we move up, we need to remove bias. We need to reduce a bias. So in research reports, when you do a lower level of bias, in publication, we expect even lower level of bias. This is why, for example, in your MPhil PhD, I will put it at this level. Okay, when you will write your PhD thesis at the end, okay, I will put it in the level of publication, because this is the I expect minimum bias there, because there should be a transparent way that you have conducted your study. So basically there should be lower level of bias, and now I'm saying in systematic reviews, okay, the bias should be even less. So this is why I'm putting emphasis on this aspect of bias in systematic reviews. There are different types of bias. I will even show to you those types of bias that we have normally in systematic reviews. So basically, as far as possible, eliminating completely after you practically impossible, but reducing the bias in your study, in your systematic review. So why do we conduct, why it is important, why in studies, why in different fields we conduct systematic literature review? It is very important actually. Okay, we identify, appraise, synthesize all relevant evidence. So, you know, in all area, there's something called evidence-based. We discuss about evidence-based medicine, evidence-based software engineering, evidence-based practice. Okay, so this is coming in all areas actually. For example, those in engineering, you practice certain things. But we say now you need to do it evidence-based. Whatever you are doing should be evidence-based. That is, you should have proven methods. And where you get those proven methods, very often you get it from systematic reviews. Okay, so summarize current. For example, I can tell you in healthcare, you cannot, for example, apply a new procedure in hospital without it going through proper verification and everything. And one way of verification is this systematic reviews. It is recommended by systematic review because there are hundreds of studies which have already prescribed and proven what you are going to use. So if 100 studies have already said, yes, it is good, it has shown conclusive results, then you can decide to use it in a hospital. I'm talking, for example, about an intervention, okay, specific intervention. So basically there should be evidence that it has worked for you to be able to use it. So this is what is called evidence-based. So it summarizes current knowledge, and very important. Why do we read systematic literature review? Because very often in systematic literature review, it identifies gaps. Very often when you start your PhD and everything, you want to know what is this, what is lacking in this research area. So very often we get it in systematic reviews. It minimizes bias. I've already talked about this. It highlights where there is not sufficient evidence. I've just said identify gaps. Combining findings from different studies can highlight new findings. Yeah, it's not that there is no novel contribution in a systematic. There can be novel contribution in a systematic review. When you are analyzing different studies, you see new things emerging as well. I'll give you examples of systematic reviews. Appraise all relevant evidence about the efficacy of an intervention. For example, in the medical field, this is very valid. That is, there is a new type of intervention. So you group all studies about this type of intervention, and then you show the results. Then we can use it as a guidelines, or we will not be use it as a guidelines. Even in scientific area, for example, assess the effectiveness of a specific technology and identify relevant knowledge gaps that we have for this particular technology, so as others can investigate. So this picture here is showing to you, is summarizing the whole story about why systematic reviews are important, because obviously the information overload, different people, different experts, they don't have time to go through each literature, analyze them, and decide which type of practice they need to do. When I say practice, I'm covering all areas: engineering, IT, science, I'm covering even medical. Okay, so you won't be able to see all around the world what people are doing, then decide, okay, I will do it this way. So if it has already been done for you through a systematic review, so then it will become very, very convenient. So this is why systematic reviews are very important, to help experts understand what is the status of this field, what has worked, what has not worked, because we have information overload. This is just to convince you in a specific area like healthcare. Okay, we use systematic reviews, so healthcare decisions should be informed by best available research evidence. So if we have those evidence, and where do we get those evidence? We won't be able to go and read each one. If people have already done those systematic reviews, then we get it very readily. So systematic reviews can show which treatment and prevention methods have been proven to work. I've already given you this example. Systematic reviews are important for pointing areas where more research is needed. I've already talked about this. Systematic reviews are the basis for what is often called evidence-based medicine or healthcare. After you evidence-based, it is in all areas now. This is the importance of systematic review. A key characteristic, most of it I've already said it, I will quickly go through it. So clearly stated titles, objective, specific questions you're addressing, comprehensive strategy for searching. You don't search in a haphazard way. And you will note here something maybe some of you will, I don't say we don't agree, but maybe that will surprise you. When we perform a systematic review, we even check for unpublished material. So it's not that we tend to give lots of importance when we do our PhD and everything to look for those documents that have been published in reputed venues, in journals, high impact factor journals and everything. When we conduct a systematic review, this is a bias basically when you do it, when you adopt this a frame of mind, you go and search for good journals, only good journals. You are going to say that, no, in my study, I'm choosing only the best. When you are doing, actually, you're introducing bias in your study. There may be, because when you say good journals and everything, you're targeting high citation, for example. You're targeting where you have very good reviews and everything, okay? But this introduces what we call publication bias. There's something called publication bias. To remove this publication bias, you go to even those conference proceedings, okay? You go for government reports, you go for repositories, general repositories for health, for example, then you are removing this publication bias. So you see here, you may have the opinion, no, I need to choose only the best, only the good journals or whatever. Even this, you will note that when we conduct a systematic review, it is taken as a minus point. Actually, there's something called gray literature. I will comment on it as we proceed, and that you need to target as well. So explicit justified criteria for inclusion, why you are choosing this one and why you are excluding the other one. So there should be very scientific way of doing it. Clear presentation, okay, of your characteristic that you're studying, what data are you extracting, and analysis of the methodological quality, okay, of the study that you have chosen. Comprehensive list of all studies excluded and justification for exclusion. Yeah, even this, we tend to ignore this aspect. When you're excluding a study, this is also something you need to state in your systematic. You have excluded those studies, and why have you excluded them? Okay, it is very important. You will see in one of the review comments that I will show to you, there was a question about this. Why are we excluding these studies? A clear analysis of the results, obviously using statistical synthesis. This is what is called meta-analysis. I've already explained to you. A structured report of the review, the way you report your review. You cannot really report it in any way you want. This is where PRISMA comes into play. It gives you a guideline for reporting your results. So an offer of a good systematic review normally formulates a good questions. It conducts a literature search using search strategy, scientific search strategy, refine the search, applying predefined inclusion, exclusion criteria, extract the important data from the study. Not only this, it assesses their quality. When you have already captured a paper, there is another step you're going to see that we need to do. We need to assess their quality, their validity and quality, and then you synthesize, group them together, you interpret those results, and you produce data reports. Okay, let me move to the next part of my presentation, and this is the most important part here. Many points I've already covered in my first part, so I will be moving quickly on those, like bias and everything. I've dwelled a lot on it. Okay, you will see these are already embedded on those stages. So anyone doing a systematic review can use those steps that I'm going to discuss with you here in any field. Actually, these are generic steps, and if you use it, and reviewers will not have any issue normal. Even in the medical field, you can use what I'm going to show to you, the stages of a systematic review. Okay, so there is someone called Cochrane. Okay, a graphic illustration of the systematic review. He was one of the first. Why I'm quoting him? I'm putting a picture because he was the first one to have, and I have told you it come from the medical field. So he was a Scottish doctor, okay, and he has given this a graphic here of what is a systematic review. You see at the top, you have some objectives that you need to set. You have a plan, you search for your studies, you select those studies, you extract data from the studies, you assess the quality of those data, you combine those data, you do your synthesis, you discuss and conclude, and at the end you have a systematic review that you disseminate to people. Yeah, I will focus on those steps. I have simplified as well. So you will see in different literatures, they use different wording. I'm using very simple wording there. Okay, I have myself, for the preparation of this presentation, gone through different protocols that have been prescribed. And I see this one to be very simple. This is why I've chosen those steps there. All review, you will see systematic review prescribed more or less the same steps, more or less the same. I've gone through around 10, 20 protocols to come up with this one, more or less same protocol. First, it says that you need to develop a focused research question. So anyway, you see when we talk about systematic review, I've told you about a focused research question. So a clearly defined focused systematic review begins with a well-defined formulated research questions. I've told you should be focused, it should be concise, clear. Okay, and this will impact on your other step. Well-formulated question will guard many aspects of your review. Searching will become easier because your question is clear, it is focused. So this is mandatory, it is a prerequisite for you to do your review, that at the start you have a clear question, clear objective of your review that you're conducting. Second step, I'm speeding up a bit. So define inclusion, exclusion criteria. This is called the review protocol. In many review process, you will see it's called a review protocol. This is where once you have your research question, to address this particular research question, you prescribe a protocol. The steps you are going to follow, the criteria you are going to use in order to select or not select a particular studies. And I think this needs to be added here. So define inclusion, exclusion criteria. So a protocol is essential, as I've told you. It helps to ensure careful a priori planning. This is what I have to in advance. It needs to be done in advance. It is consistency. It leads to consistency, transparency that we discussed earlier, repeatable, and integrity. So if you have it, reviewers will say, okay, this guy is following a very well-defined plan. So it should be a serious review that he is conducting. So one of the features is going to be systematic review from narrative, traditional review, is this pre-selection criteria, inclusion, exclusion, and those things. So when we talk about inclusion, exclusion criteria, so one of the features that is, I've already said it, pre-selection, pre-specification of inclusion and exclusion criteria. So once the study question is formalized, you have a very strong question. The author must compose a comprehensive list of inclusion and exclusion. What you are going to include in your study, what you are not going to select in your studies. That is to avoid, you see here, to avoid selection bias. By doing this, I'm avoiding selection bias because I'm already saying from the start only, these are things I will consider, these are things I will not consider. So formalize before data extraction and analysis. And I'm showing to you here from one of my paper, not the one that I will show you at the end, but from one of my other paper, okay, done with another PhD students who have already graduated. Okay, so we have done a systematic review of pervasive mobile healthcare system for chronic disease monitoring. Okay, application of mobile in healthcare. So you see here, I'm giving you the list of inclusion and exclusion criteria. It says to be included in the review system had, because we are talking about a PHMS, that is pervasive mobile healthcare systems. Okay, so a system had to exhibit the following characteristics: use of mobile phones. If there is no mobile phone, it is not a mobile system, so we exclude it. And wireless infrastructure as an intervention that should be included there in the system. Support for chronic disease. If it is not doing monitoring of a chronic disease, it is out of our scope of our paper, so we don't select it. Here we're giving an inclusion criteria, so it should be in this domain. It should be using some biosensors. It should have been published. You see, even time span I'm giving from 2011 and 2016. Here also you need to be very careful. Why are you giving this time? I have a reviewer for one of my paper that have that have all this question. You have said you are taking from 2015 to 2020, for example. Why? What is the rationale? So even this you need to be able to justify. Okay, so systemic included articles prescribed that do not contribute original research. Sole purpose is to educate, not to monitor something, a particular chronic disease. Other than English language, we are not considering. Here I'm introducing a bias. If I do this, actually it is a bias. It is a language bias. We call it a language bias. But as this is what after you cannot eliminate all bias. Actually, here there is a bias, that is, it is English language. Okay, in the form of book chapters, we are excluding book chapters and unpublished works, in this case, master's or doctoral dissertation. So this was some of the exclusion we had in this study. Next step, search the literature. Search the literature. After you about search strategies. Okay, so where do you search? You go in databases, basically, to search for studies. Different fields have different databases. For example, medical people, science people, you can go to PubMed, for example. IT people will go to ACM, engineering people will go to IEEE databases to search for papers. But if you do this, it is wrong for a systematic review. Because recall, we have said you need to search everywhere. So search should be comprehensively. Search comprehensively. Terminology, databases, not one database. Very often when you choose one database, the reviewer will say no, but your review is very limited. We cannot accept it because you have chosen only one database. It is biased. It is biased towards one database. Search for gray literature. Recall I mentioned about this term gray literature. Okay, not commercially published. Search for unpublished studies as well. Reduce risk. Recall I mentioned about publication bias. Reduce risk of publication bias. So a comprehensive and reproducible literature search is the foundation of a systematic review. If you don't do this carefully, the whole review is flawed. The whole systematic review is flawed. Now you have different search strategies that you are going to use. Okay, so carefully consider the scope of your review, the resources that you have. Inclusion, exclusion criteria should use time period. You see, one of the criteria that I've used to include from 2011 to 2016, this was a time criteria, time period. Databases that you're going to consider, registries, other sources you're going to consider, gray literature. Okay, databases for interdisciplinary, you have Scopus, Web of Science. Okay, specialized databases include IEEE, ACM, PubMed, and everything. Okay, so the search strategy should be designed to identify maximum number of studies. So you need to be able to get all studies that contribute to whatever you are discussing. This is why your original question should be very focused. Otherwise, you may run the risk of getting too many studies to evaluate. Okay, so you need to use database specific control vocabulary. You know, those like ACM has got a hierarchy of terms that they use in their publication. When you submit a publication, it tells you in which terms, in which area exactly it is. So this is called the database specific control vocabulary, a term that you need to take care. Okay, so when you are searching, after your main discussions about bias, database bias, don't use a single database. Publication bias, I've already explained to you. Don't focus on one type of publication, high impact, good journal. Okay, you are already eliminating many studies, okay, that may not have been conclusive, but that have got very important data, because there is, for example, for publication, you should have very conclusive results and everything. So this is called publication bias. English language bias, just like I've just shown to you an example where we were English language bias. You're excluding all other languages. Okay, citation bias, you're focusing on a high citation a publication. So this is again where you ignore, compare with studies with inconclusive or negative findings. Very often where you have publication having negative findings, they are not cited a lot. So you're already eliminating such kind of studies by doing what is called citation bias, by choosing only those with highest citation. Gray literature, I've told you, everything that go outside journal publication, conference proceeding, research reports, government reports, dissertation, PhD dissertation, for example, research monographs and everything, that needs to be considered. Yeah, in your search strategy, you need to be using synonyms. So very often, like I say, I don't know, pervasive. What is pervasive? So then you need to search for the synonym for this term, because otherwise you may be missing others that have published in the same area but have used a synonym and have not used the name that you are giving to your study. So when you are searching, carefully choose the word that you are choosing. So hierarchical term, that is, there is a umbrella term, then there are more specific term. Equivalent term, this is synonym. Associative term, there is a word, but there is also another word that says the same thing. This is called associative. Okay. So one of the search strategies is we use Boolean operators. Okay, that is, we say this term and the other term, both are taken. I'm giving you an example here that we have used, that I've used in one of my paper in order to select typical PMHS, so that the paper that I mentioned earlier, at the same time narrow down the selected publication in a reasonable range. The search term pervasive healthcare system and mobile and chronic disease was used. This reduced my my number of application by a lot. Even this one, you can get hundreds in the range of even 400, 500. So you need to be careful. And the search was limited to the last 5 years as well, namely 2011, 2016. So this I've already said it. So this is called using Boolean operators. And you can use all this, and you need to give your reason why also you are doing this. And then you have you need to document anyway your search, but how you're searching, what are the different dates you're using, which search strategies you're using. Okay, so this is, there was one. Okay, yeah, it is synonyms and Boolean operators. Yeah, next step is select your studies. Okay, you have already searched, you have got 500. Okay, now we need to select which one. Okay, so their identification of the studies meeting, now you use your inclusion exclusion criteria. You review the titles and at the first steps, because if you have in terms of 200, 300, 500, it will be very difficult to look inside the paper, the whole paper. So you look at the titles and the abstract for a first selection. Next step, you use at the full text. Okay, even this at the end you will have to do, but already your number of papers have already reduced by a lot. And again, use your inclusion criteria. You have different tools that you maybe use to sort your papers, and Note, Refman, all these are, Medley is another one that you can, or you can go simply for Excel. Okay, so these steps after you assess your titles and abstract, then if in doubt, normally we include. We don't exclude, we include normally. Okay, it requires judgment. That is, this is why you need to have more than one reviewer, and a third person can check in case there are conflicting views. Next step, now that we have already selected the studies, you need to assess for quality. Yeah, it's not that when it is satisfying my search, automatically it is, even if it passes my inclusion exclusion criteria. Let's say it has already gone through my inclusion exclusion criteria, not necessarily you need to add it to your review. Okay, you need to go inside the paper and check its validity, the result they have obtained, and the relevance. Okay, not all published and published literature is satisfactory methodologically rigor. Not just because it is published in a journal, that doesn't mean it is sound. So you need to do some qualitative assessment as well there. Yeah, and there are tools again that we can use. ROBIS is one. Risk of bias in systematic reviews is actually a tool that helps you, quality assessment tool for quantitative studies. Again, this is another tool. CAPS is another one. It is a checklist. I'll show you the checklist. You check whether there is clear aims. You check whether there is appropriate methodology. You check whether there is sampling strategy. You check whether there is data collection. You check those things. If it has those things, it tends to be a good paper. Next step, you extract data. Now that I've already selected those studies, I've got 50, 60, 75 papers. I need to extract the data of interest. Even here, you need to be careful. What data I'm extracting, in which format I'm extracting those data. So extract reported finding from selected using a data extraction form. You need to give your data extraction form. Okay, and it should be, this will ensure that you're extracting the same data from all the studies. There is no bias again there. Okay, so extraction form and approaches should be determined by the needs of the specific review. At least 2 review authors should independently extract the data. Again, to remove bias there. Be clear what information you are extracting. Okay, information will need to be correlated related to the methodology that they have used, the study characteristic, the specific outcome that they have used. Next step, I'm nearing the end. So next step, analyze and present the result. Now all the data has been extracted. You have saved it, I don't know, in Excel or whatever. It needs to be analyzed. There are two types of analysis that we do, obviously, qualitative or quantitative. So if your results, your narrative, if your results, there are more of narrative types, okay, so you do a narrative synthesis. Okay, findings are summarized and explained in words. But however, if you have values like performance levels in CPU or performance of a particular intervention or environmental factors, measurements and everything, then you can perform statistical analysis. You can perform what is called a meta-analysis. And if you do it, it adds a lot of value to your systematic review. So when you have quantitative results in all the studies, you are strongly encouraged to do a meta-analysis, that is to do a statistical analysis of your results. So the whole idea here of synthesis, building up, putting together, making a whole out of the different parts, the different studies needs to be synthesized. This is what it's called. So all the studies results similar enough to be compiled into a single numerical result. If your answer to this question is no, then perform qualitative descriptive analysis. If your answer to this question is yes, meaning you have values, you have measurements, then the answer is yes, then you perform a quantitative meta-analysis. We expect that you perform a quantitative meta-analysis. So techniques that we use to perform these analysis, you can use tabulation, you use grouping clusters, you group similar study under specific headings and everything. You can perform vote counting. This 5 studies is in this line, 10 studies is in this line. So you are counting and doing a vote counting. You can use flow diagram, summary of findings table, forest plots. These are techniques. Quickly, so a PRISMA flow diagram is one of the technique that is very popular, extremely used in the medical field and used in other fields as well, to show how you have gone about in selecting your studies and analyzing those studies. This is an example, the PRISMA flow diagram. You see at the top, record, identify, database search, additional records by manual search. You have your total records after removing duplicates, record screen, you have excluded some, how many you have excluded, why you have excluded. Then you go inside the paper. When you go inside the paper, we exclude further for quality recall. For quality reason, we remove some paper because their results are not good enough. Okay, and then studies included in the qualitative synthesis, studies included in the quantitative synthesis, if you have done some quantitative synthesis. You can use finding tables. These are very easy. You tabulate results and then you show comparison between the different studies. This is an example, a grades methodology, again used in health studies and everything. Forest plot, again, it is a technique that we use to analyze different studies, originally used in clinical testing and everything, now used even in observational studies, that is in other areas as well. You can go through it. This is a technique that we use to analyze data. My last step is the interpretation. Now that you have already analyzed the results, you need to interpret the results, and don't forget your original questions that you had put, and then you need to answer those questions now. Okay, so statement of findings, discussion and conclusion. So summarize your main finding, your strengths and limitation, interpretation of the contents or the evidence, initial research question. Don't forget about your initial research question, and then you can identify implication for current practice and future research as well, because we talk about research gap. So quickly, with Kitchenham. So I'm already nearly one hour. So Kitchenham basically is just a more precise interpretation of what I have just explained to you. Okay, so Kitchenham, it grouped all the activities I have just explained to you in 3 main phases. One that's called planning the review, conducting the review, and reporting the review. There are 2 versions of Kitchenham. This is the 2004, where there's planning the review. You do identification of your research question, your protocol, your research, your studies, selection, primary studies, do a quality. Now you know what I mean by quality assessment. That is, you need to go inside the paper and check whether it is of good quality or not. And then you eliminate or you choose it. You extract data, you synthesize your data, and then you report your finding. This is the 2007 version, where it is more detailed. It has added a few parts there. Okay. You can go through it. those part that was added. But for example, in IT, in software engineering, this is a preferred method, the Kitchenham method. And if for exactly those steps I've already explained, there's nothing different here, because you see define question, have your protocol, inclusion, exclusion, identify your research, select, quality assessment, extract data, synthesis, and report your findings. Basically, it is the same thing, just that it's structured differently. Again, the same thing here. The one before the last point, PRISMA. PRISMA, there is a checklist because you need to report your findings. PRISMA stands for Preferred Reporting Items, Systematic Review, and Meta-analysis. Again, first proposed for medical field, now more widely used in other areas. It prescribes to you 27 item checklist that you need to, when you report your findings, you need to state. I'll show to you those 27 criteria. Here it is: title, abstract, rational, objective, eligibility criteria. You need to specify all this. Your selection process, your data collection, data items, risk of bias assessment you have conducted, you have removed it, and a synthesis method you have used, reporting bias assessment, study selection, characteristic. Again, all those things, it expects that you report it when you're reporting your study. Obviously, SLR tend to be lengthy papers. This is why it is quite challenging as well. So these are the prescription from PRISMA. And the flow diagram, I've already shown you an example of the flow diagram. You start with some number, big numbers, how you reduce by passing through your inclusion, exclusion, quality assessment, and everything. So those diagrams are available in the Okay, my last point of discussion for this presentation, I'll give you a sample. Please, Nushra, can you mute yourself? Yeah. Again, Nushra. There is Nushra's iPhone. Can you mute yourself? Otherwise, I will have to go there and mute myself. So yeah, here I'll give you last point of discussion. I'll give you an example, okay, of everything that I have shown to you. Let me provide to you an example of a paper. Here it is. Mrs. Sudachekul is in the presentation today, and it is her paper, okay, that we have done together in the context of her PhD. Okay, so a systematic review of text mining approaches applied to the various application areas in the biological domain. Okay, this was a paper that she has published. It is published in a good venue as well. After you, it was not easy. We have gone through 4 rounds of reviews for it to be published. So I wanted to share this experience with you. So let me go through the paper. You will see all the steps that I have explained to you is there. How we are removing the bias, what are the how we are doing quality assessment, inclusion, exclusion criteria. Everything is there. It's followed very systematically. This is why it has eventually been accepted for publication. So I'll show to you the paper. You tell me whether you are able to see my screen. Is this visible? The paper is visible. Anyone?
Yes.
Okay, good. So a systematic review of text mining approaches I've already told you. So I'll show to you, I'll browse through it quickly, just to show to you those steps that I've already explained to you. There was a background about the topic, defining different terms and everything. Let me give the research background. This is where is more important. Again, describing the different fields, information retrieval and everything. I want to show to you the methodology. Here it is. It starts somewhere. Methodology and approach. You see here, we have used Kitchenham. Okay, it says Kitchenham and PRISMA guidelines. Okay, and they're taking literature review. We have defined at the start, very start, our research questions. You see those research questions here. Okay, the different research questions. Which sources, which text mining and techniques are most appropriate related to the different techniques in the biological domain. A number of research questions. Here we have search strategy. Whether there was an inclusion, exclusion criteria should be down. Okay, so search strategy. You see those Boolean operators I've talked in my presentation. Okay, and we have used Google Scholar and everything. So those a strategy that we have used. Which databases we are considering? Number of databases are there that have been considered, and everything is justified. Why those databases? Inclusion, exclusion criteria. Here it is. Papers to be considered in this review have been selected. inclusion. So this will consider peer-reviewed papers published in English. Already there is a language bias, but it was there. Okay, only primary studies were included. We need to give our justification why. Okay, meta-analysis surveys were excluded. To be eligible for inclusion in the review, the primary requirement was the article needed to focus on the description of the design and use of NLP. For you see here, you give your justification why you're going for this. Why this is your inclusion criteria. Therefore, studies which describe techniques which are in specific biomedical areas were included. Those which describe design, generic algorithm, and implementation text were excluded because it doesn't contribute. So you see here, I motivate my inclusion exclusion criteria. You don't just choose like this. You need to give your proper motivation. So this is inclusion exclusion criteria. Conducting the review at the start. When have we conducted it? How many results it has written? 1.5 million. You see at the start in Google Scholar, and then in base database 168,000. Okay, then how we have reduced it to 400 200 results after screening. Okay, and how it has been further reduced. The resulted in additional 27 records is that when we have done manual search and everything. So this has resulted in 609, and then when applying inclusion exclusion criteria, we have got 56 studies that we have considered. Then in those 56 studies, we perform a quality assessment. We go inside the paper, we perform our quality assessment using the PRISMA and everything, and then we do a real quality assessment. You are going to see in this table. I define quality criteria: yes, no, partially. I give marks, even ranking for those. Yes means a 1, no means a 0, partially means 0.5, for example. Then if it is above 3, I'm taking it. If it is below 3, we are excluding it. You see here, even this, we do it in a very scientific manner. Undisputable, that is, it based on these values on only, and it is very scientific. This is what the reviewers looks for. And this is a PRISMA flow diagram I took earlier, so it was there in this study. And this is reporting the study using tables, tabular form, using graphs and everything. You report your result. Very important, at the end in your discussion, you address your research questions. In discussion down, there should be each research question and what are the findings. The reviews tends to be quite long. So you see here, we are addressing each research question. Here it is RQ5, in which application area is text mining used in the biochemical domain. So I quote all the different studies, I tabulate my results. So it addresses my research questions. So that is an example. You see it relate exactly to those steps that I have described. And let me, to end my presentation, so as I give you some time for interaction, let me show to you some of the review comments we had received. This is interesting. You will see it was not straightforward. Normally, it is not straightforward, those papers. You see here, I'm sure you're able to see my screen. So it says originality, does a paper contain new significant? The study has contribution, they agree, but also inconsistencies between the title and the research question. You see, even those things like you have given a title, your research question should relate to your title, and in relation to the inclusion. So these three parameters, you need to link everything: title, research question, inclusion, exclusion criteria. If there are some discrepancy, you see the reviewer is not happy about it. Criteria reduce the search scope, so the title and the question should be narrowed. I cannot have criteria focus, but then my title is saying broadly in the area or whatever. So you see, the reviewer was not happy, so we had to amend it. Another comment we received, for example, to me, it is still quite unsatisfactory to present one such research field based on 38. Originally, we had 38 papers. You see, at the end, we have 58. We had to increase, and we had to give justification. Why? Okay, so you see here, the reviewer was not satisfied that we have reduced it so much. It says that in Web of Science, we have 2,000. How come in the last 5 years, how come we are ignoring so many important papers as to him? Based on our inclusion exclusion criteria, it says that, yes, assume that your inclusion criteria reduce the number of studies. So in this regard, I would like you to explain. You see, maybe we claim, yes, based on my inclusion exclusion criteria, it has been reduced, but he wants us to explain why those inclusion exclusion criteria. Another comment with respect to the methodology. Why did you take the studies performed from, you see, even the period, there should be a reasoning behind it. Why not earlier and everything? And in our paper, we have explained. I'm not able to go through each of those comments, but these are the comments we have received. The study was very interesting and everything, however, necessary fully justified. Given the systematic review, you also identify most relevant studies. The paper lacks significant research. You see here, they were not happy that we have ignored some papers, and it's even code here. There were over 1 million results, 168,000 and everything. And eventually we come up with 53. Then we have added some more, so we need to justify why. So this is it. You will see some further reading and checklists here that you can go, that I'll mention in my presentation, some important references. Yeah, I think we have some 15 minutes also for questions and discussion to end this this presentation. You see, I've tried to give you all the steps. Okay, I've tried to motivate you at the start with respect to what is a systematic review, not confuse it with a literature review. I think if you have followed me from the start, you have been able to get the difference very well. Okay, and my next objective was to show to you those generic steps that you need to follow. You miss one, for example, you miss quality assessment, your paper will be rejected. And if you miss it in your PhD thesis, you claim that you're doing a systematic review and you miss your quality assessment, you will have problems with the examiners. Believe me, examiners tends to be very fussy about those the methodology that you use. So this is why you need to carefully go through those steps. You need to be very attentive to it. And then I've given you an example of a full paper. I've even shown to you reviewers' comments to convince you to look for those things. Okay, it's not something that that we can take lightly. They look for those things, and in our case, obviously, it was a paper that had gone through different reviews, and we had the opportunity to bring whatever they were asking and to convince them that that we have done it. So that's it. Now I will invite questions from the audience. Not only questions. If you want to share some experience. If you have submitted papers, maybe not systematic literature review, when there was literature review, there were comments, you can share it with us. It is welcome. Yes, participants, I'm here to listen to you. You want additional clarifications? Any question that you deem necessary to ask? I'm open to it. I may not have answers to all your questions, but obviously. I see
hello, Kavi.
From the chat.
Kavi?
Yes, Wisdom.
I have a simple question. With respect to the search that you did, you use a Google Scholar. Do you believe that having access to a database such as Web of Science would have been helpful for systematic literature?
I can tell you in one of my paper that I submitted with a PhD students, I think we limited to IEEE database. We had subscription to IEEE database and everything. And we had comments from reviewers saying, why the bias towards IEEE, even this. So basically, registration to, for example, Science Direct, Emerald, things like this, will help a lot, obviously. Okay, and because to conduct such studies, already the reviewers are not happy when you select one particular database. And I had this comment with one of my PhD students, and where we need to go through different types of search, different types of databases that you need to consider in your study. Otherwise, there will be a database bias. So that's true. It is required. The more you can include, the better it is. But then supervisor can be of some help if the supervisors have got registration to those databases. But Web of Science, Corpus, and everything, these are well known and these are well regarded. So they will expect this. That's true. Yeah, I see someone have posted something on chat. Shana Lawton. Okay, how many research papers do we? I was expecting this question actually. There's no definite answer to this, okay, because it all depends on your research questions. One, it all depends on your inclusion exclusion criteria. Two, okay, and it all depends on your criteria for your quality assessment. Three. So as you see, you will start with search, general search. You may have, in terms of thousands of papers. We had even millions of papers giving those terms or whatever. Okay, as we go down, it all depends on your inclusion exclusion criteria, and there may be debate there. As you can see in one of my reviewers' comment, there was debate about us requesting us why this inclusion exclusion criteria, it is limiting the study and everything. That we will have to deal, obviously, with the reviewers. But I won't venture to give a number because it will not be fair. Okay, it will not be fair. But your study should be comprehensive, should be very comprehensive. Okay, and if you want a number in the study that was accepted, and we have seen, for example, there was 58 papers at the end. Okay, 58 that we have gone inside, we have analyzed, we have extracted data. So 58 is already a good sum, and depending on your research question, it can be reasonable. Okay, yes, I have another question on the chat. What tendency have you noticed with publishers? Do they tend to accept SLRs from well-known? This is a very good question. Authors, pioneers in the field instead of new researchers. To be frank with you, you are very right. I should say it is not easy, especially when it is SLR. Especially when it is SLR, and they tend to accept more from reputed lecturers, not lecturers, that is researchers. I'm saying, but researchers. So yes, very true. Because an SLR tends to consolidate many research together and give certain directions in the research. They tend to accept from reputed institutions, reputed all the bias that you are doing MPhil PhD. You know the bias, publication bias that we have in the research community. But this is not a reason for you not to try. Okay, like after you, Mrs. Sudacha could have tried with lots of effort. Nearly five submissions, 4 rounds of reviews. At the end, it has been accepted because the quality was there, because we have been able to satisfy the reviewers. So it needs perseverance. It needs perseverance. SLR not easy, okay? But if you have one, this one can become a reference in your research career. Okay, already it can be something that that is used as a reference. Okay, so it's worth the hardship, it's worth the effort that you are going to put. Already in all your PhDs, you are doing lots of work with respect to literature review. If you can convert it in an SLR, it will be a very good contribution if ever it is accepted for publication. But however, I have seen in PhDs only, not publication, but in PhD students conducting SLR. Okay, but then you need to be very careful not to miss anything, otherwise you will have problems with examiners. Yeah, any other question? You can also using Uju as well, or through the chat. We still have some minutes. Anyone want to share some experience? I will be happy to hear.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, Arvind.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My question is about research questions.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, like systematic reviews give us very unbiased results. So how we derive good research questions so we don't come across to biased results?
Okay, good question. Good question. Because you see, your research question will determine everything that will come afterwards. Will determine your inclusion exclusion criteria, will determine your search strategy, will determine your quality assessment. It will determine everything that will come after the question. So it is very important that you choose your question very well. And we can say by choosing a research question itself already there is a bias, because you want to study this particular question and not the other question. Okay, which is very normal. It is very normal. Just that Just that in your paper, when you are writing your paper, especially if you're sending it for review and everything, where you intend to publish it, you need to convince the reviewer why this research question is important. This is where you can remove the bias there, the point that you're asking me. Convince the reviewer why this research question is important. Why, how now you can convince a reviewer about this research question, saying that so many papers have said there's a gap there, okay, already, okay, about this type of study. There's no results where we have done some synthesis, and there's lack of, for example, let me give you an example. If already when you are doing your search for something in your area, whatever, you come across exactly the same thing. You come across hundreds systematic literature reviews that have already been conducted. Excuse me. Yeah, 100 systematic literature review that has already been conducted on the point that you want to do your review. This is already an indication that you should not do it. Okay, you are doing the same thing. You should be having something new you are going to explore that has not yet been explored, that will bring value. For example, in the paper I've just shown to you from Mrs. Chakut, the value was there that biomedical researchers, they don't know what type of tools are used, what are predominant, what are types of tools, types of text mining approaches that are more predominant for certain areas. And this was missing in existing literature. Nowhere we were able to find those answers. So it was worth exploring. So we have been able to convince the reviewers, yes, you see, there's none. Not none, but there's very limited literature with respect to this. So it is a question that is worth exploring. So if you are able to do this, definitely already you get the attention of your reviewer. Already the reviewer will look at your study from a different angle, saying, okay, this is something that is interesting coming. Okay, now your methodology, you should be careful with it, but already from the start. So I think it addressed your query about the research, and this is the most important things actually. Yes, any other question? I don't see anything from the chat. We still have 1 minute. Anyone want to say anything? Mrs. Chakut, are you still around?
Yes, I'm here, Kavi.
Yeah,
I think there are a few more questions on the chat.
If you want to share anything from your experience of the very stringent review to everyone, you're welcome.
Yes, so as you mentioned, if you follow all the guidelines in the Kitchenham method and in the PRISMA guidelines, I think it should be okay. Most of the reviewers, they don't really have anything to do. So I think there's concerning the PRISMA checklist, this is something which has helped me a lot, because when you follow all the steps in the PRISMA checklist, in fact, these are things, in fact, the reviewers are looking for. So before submitting, I know many journals, they do request for this PRISMA checklist, but I think the journal in which we submitted, they did not really request the checklist. However, it did help us a lot to be able to write a good review, and in fact these are one of the things the reviewers have been asking about. So I think it's a good, if you follow all the steps in the checklist, I think it should be okay. Maybe the review process may be much easier. Yeah, so yeah, I think this is what I wanted to share as well. And I think there's a few questions in the chat as well, if you didn't notice.
Let me check if there are others coming, because no,
from Piyusha Emre and Sheza John Buckus.
Oh, yeah, I've not seen those questions. Let me see what I have already addressed. The new question is coming. Let me see. Tendency, what tendency? This I have already addressed. No, yeah, this I've already addressed. Let me check down. Yeah, Priyusha Imrit is asking, do we need to submit inclusion exclusion criteria to reviewers? when submitting a potential review article. Definitely, this is mandatory actually. Let me see if I have understood the question. Do we need to submit inclusion exclusion criteria to reviewers? When no, it should appear in your paper. This is not a choice actually. You don't need to submit to the reviewers. It should appear in your paper. Actually, if you don't specify it, it is a big shortcoming. It is a big shortcoming. It is already should be, because this is part what we call review protocol. It is part of your review protocol, this inclusion exclusion criteria. So mandatorily, you need to not only submit, you need to even motivate your inclusion exclusion criteria. Otherwise, very often you have question, why so? What you are taking last 5 years? What happened 1 year before? Why you are not choosing? So things like this. And all your criteria, you need to motivate them. You need to give the rationale for them. So basically, yes, you need to include it in your paper for reviewers to look at it. And very often they will have questions and comments about it. Let me continue. Shezat has asked for about selecting high quality papers only introduce a bias. Doesn't using a certain number of low quality papers and papers in gray areas instead of make the result debatable and reviewers question those inclusion. No, you need to be motivated. You need, well, when we say gray area, let me say one point here. When you say gray area, we have said conference proceeding, we have said government reports, we have said PhD thesis. All these are publication. Very often PhD students, they have put many things in the doctoral thesis, but it is not yet published. It has not been published or whatever. We are able to capture this as as well. But normally when you go for we don't say low quality papers. I won't say low quality papers. I will say other types of papers. When I've said don't choose only from those repeated databases or repeated journals, high impact factor, to remove this publication bias. It doesn't mean that we should choose low quality paper, but anyway, any low quality paper will get out when we apply our quality assessment. So no worries about this one. However, in gray literature, you can extract some points, some results that have never been seen in those high repeated papers. You know what is the point here? The point is that those high impact papers, high impact journals and everything, they tend to show certain types of results. If you don't have certain type of results, very often the paper are not accepted. But there may be what we are saying, there may be, for example, in medical field, if a particular intervention, there are some issues with respect to it. And some study have proved, yes, there are some issues with respect to it. Very often it doesn't get through to high impact journal because this is an issue thing. It is not something, something that has worked, giving very good results, tend to be more accepted in high impact, and something that are showing negative results tend to be less accepted. But those negative results are important for your review. Will allow you to do a certain analysis that others have not been able to do. You can say, yes, there are results that are opposing as well, things like that you can compare and you can come to conclusion. So no, we are not saying you should choose low quality papers. I have not said this because you will perform a quality assessment. Choosing other types of unpublished papers, review reports, doctoral thesis are important. This is what we are saying. And we are also saying that if you choose only high impact journals, there are certain kind of publication that you will get only, and certain kind of publication you may be missing important results. Let me move to a next question if ever we have one. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. What about MPhil, PA, PUSHA, MRIT thesis? Do we need to document about inclusion exclusion criteria? I've told you, your supervisor will be the best one to respond to whether you need to include. The question I think here is whether we need to do a systematic literature review in our PhD thesis. I won't tell tell you to do it or not to do it. This is something you need to discuss with your supervisor, because I won't commit there. It varies from area to area. It depends on your context. It depends on many parameters. What I'm telling you, if ever you mention that you're doing a systematic literature review, include all the steps after you. Be very careful. The question was, do we need to document about inclusion, exclusion criteria? Yes, very, very important. This is what I have been stressing on. Even in your PhD thesis, not publication, you are not submitting in a journal for publication, you're submitting in your PhD thesis, and you're claiming you are doing a systematic literature review. Be very careful. I have seen evaluation, because I've told you I've sit in many review committees, I've sit in many board of examiners and everything, even for PhDs. I've seen comments. Using this experience, I'm telling you, see, if you're conducting a literature review, normal review, even here examiners can tell you, no, you should have approach it differently, you should have a proper mechanism and everything. Even here you can have certain comments from examiners. But if you say that you are performing a systematic literature review, more so, now the examiners will be more like careful and telling you, you're claiming you're doing a systematic literature review, but you have not included your inclusion exclusion criteria, you have not done a quality assessment, you have not done this step, that step. So you see, SLR can add value to your PhD thesis, definitely. But you need to be doing it very well, and if you follow all the steps after you, like you see, there is a how do we say, a report from one of a person who have done a systematic literature review, that is Mrs. Chakut, and she has correctly explained that if you follow those guidelines and everything, and you put those steps very well, there should not be any issue. So there is a witness here already, you can see. So just you need to be careful with your methodology. Yes, I don't see. Is there any other questions you have seen? Others? No, I don't see from my side.
No,
I think I've addressed all questions.
Yes, in fact. So I think yes, no more question. But let me thank you and Sudha as well today for today, Kavi. And has been very insightful, and I'm sure most of our participants have found value added in that today. So again, thanks a lot, and we hope to find you again for another workshop later in this year. We can already discuss about it. Good.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks a lot, and yes, and for our students, just stay tuned. We are having another workshop on the 15th. We will send the email on Monday, and that will be a workshop with Emerald. So that will be about academic writing and journal publications. We will send the email. So just stay tuned. So thank you, everyone, and stay safe, and bye-bye. Well,
I see some good feedback coming on the chat system. So I thank everyone who have followed carefully the presentation. So it was a pleasure for me to share some experience with everyone, and I hope you will benefit. And this is the purpose. And anyway, the director of Doctoral School is saying Doctoral School is a platform for sharing as well. This is why I've invited Mrs. Chakut to share her experience. So it is a platform to share your experiences and everything. So you're encouraged to attend the different sessions, and especially to ask questions, to share your different experiences. I see questions, Bhupen, about
yes, recording.
Can the recording be made available?
Yes, we will. Well, I think you recorded it when you sent it to us. Yes, probably that was a little bit the reason why we asked for the recording. And again, as you said it, we expect everyone to be present for our workshop. It's meant for you. If you would see, this one was a bit at 5 o'clock. That was mainly because of our part-time student as well. So we cannot always do it at 5 o'clock. So we will try to make a good alternate between the evening and the morning sessions. So we'll come back to you on the recording. Merci beaucoup. I think it's already dark outside. I will wish you a bon appétit.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, it was
So
a
I think
pleasure.
you will have to end the meeting yourself, Kavi, because you were the.
Okay, everyone. So we'll end the meeting here. Bye-bye.
Bye.